So good morning, everyone. My name is Awa, and I am one of the co-founders of Crypto Labs. And today I will be giving this presentation on variants of ProofofStake and the privacy limitations. So as part of the introduction, I would like to start by saying that I want to clarify the definition of what proof of something really means, because I'm sure that most of you have heard the definition of, for example, proof of work is a consensus algorithm. And even if you go to Wikipedia and you search for proof of stake, what you can find is that it's defined as a mechanism for distributed systems to achieve consensus. But regardless of proof of work being pretty pervasive on most public blockchains, it actually doesn't have that much to do with consensus in itself. And in fact, most proof of work systems rely on something called consensus, Nakamoto consensus, which in essence means that the longest chain is the one that wins, or the longest pool of electricity consumption is the only true one chain. So I don't know if there's actually a formalized terminology for proof of stake, for proof of something. But the way I would define it is a set of mechanisms or an algorithm that determines who is allowed to participate in who is eligible, first of all, to mine the next block or to produce the next block, or in other words, who is allowed to, what kind of requirements you have to fulfill for you as a peer to participate in consensus. That's like the generic word the way I would define proof of something. So, right, if you look at proof of work, what it means that in order to be eligible, you have to download the code and you just have to start mining and you have to start consuming electricity. If you're lucky, then you can produce the next block. In proof of stake, it depends on a combination of some economic conditions together with some sort of random way of allocating rights to get the next slot. But that we go now into the details of what those conditions are, and that really depends on which variant of proof of stake we're talking about. And there's already a couple of them. So, let's see here. Okay. So the variants of proof of stake I'm covering in this session. This is actually a talk I'm giving like many times, and next one will be San Francisco. But hopefully by then I will include the Casper and all the Ethereum ones. That'll be interesting. But the ones we're covering today is Delegated proof of stake, which is used by networks like EOS. Then we have Liquid proof of stake in the case of Tezos. We have Cosmos POS, or informally known as BDSM POS, which, by the way, it's a great confusion. It stands for Bonded, Delegating, Slashing, and Merkle proof of stake. And it's used by platforms like the Cosmos Hub, which hasn't launched yet. Hopefully, it should launch around this quarter. But let's see. And the nominated proof of stake, which is used by networks like Polkadot. So let's start with delegated proof of stake. So in essence, the way delegated proof of stake works is that you get voted. So in networks like EOS, can you actually see this? Well, I hope you see this. In networks like EOS, token holders can use the tokens to cast votes, and votes are normally weighted by how much each holder has. And in there, if you rank the top 21 of all the different block producers that they call by votes, then you basically get called an active block producer. Or else, if you're like in the following 100 ranked, then you can call like standby block producer. There's really nothing at stake because it's the assumption that on which EOS or delegated proof of stake relies on is basically that, let's say, if a producer acts maliciously, then the next time he's probably not going to be voted again for. Either that works in practice, I don't really know. It might actually be a good exercise to do that. You take a look at all the different voting slots of EOS, and you see how much that set of 21 validators have changed. That would be interesting practice to do. But generally, there's nothing bonded, nothing at stake, and because of that, also there's no slashing conditions like we will see in other proof of stake versions. And then as soon as you are elected as one of those, you get basically rewards. And you get a fixed rate per if you stand by or active. And you get like percentage based according to the blocks you're allocated to validate. And delegated proof of stake in the case of the US relies on the mathematical consensus. Again, longest chain is one that wins. In the case of liquid proof of stake, I right now only have Tezos in mind. And by the way, these two networks are basically right now in production. Well, Tezos calls themselves as like betanet, but betanet will transition to mainnet. So in the case of Tezos, bakers, validators in their terminology, have to stake a minimum of 10,000 XTZ themselves. So they have to own those, and they have to put that into a specific address, which later on turn into baker's address. And then the slots are allocated by cycles. Cycles is the way they measure time in Tezos. And then they are mostly done pseudo-randomly. So probabilistically speaking, in the longer run, all the bakers should have been assigned roughly the same amount of slots. And also in Tezos, there's two main activities for validators or for bakers, which is validated blocks, so baking, what they call, and also endorsement. Endorsement is basically you contribute to, you check that the previous block was correct, just like some computation you do as a baker, and you contribute to the fitness scoring of that block. But again, simply those two tasks are punishable. One sec. Those two things are punishable, and then so if you do double signing or double endorsing, then you can lose up to 512 theses per block, per double sign block, plus the rewards produced up to that period. And the double baking, double endorsing is 64 per double endorsed block. And then the rewards are baking plus the fees of endorsement, very basic things. Again, like mathematical consensus in the case of Tezos. You had a question, but I think, can you save it for later? I'm not sure how good I'm.
It's right in, because the question is who generates the randomness?
Who generates what?
The randomness.
Who generates randomness? So at the protocol, there's a way that the simple mechanism that generates a number. It's like, I don't know exactly how that works, how they generate a random seed in this case, but maybe we can I can look into that later. But it is at the protocol that they generate random numbers, and then they basically match that to different bakers that are available. And then they assign that and that, yeah. But let's go back to it later. Is that fine? Okay, and then Cosmos POS is, in order to be a peer, or in order to be a validator, what you have to do is you have to stake, which means you have to sell bond plus, or you can also pull together delegation. You don't necessarily have to acquire yourself this delegation. There's not really that much of a distinction as in the case of Tezos, because in the case of Tezos, actually the delegators don't have anything at stake. So if you misbehave as a validator, only your tokens are like the maximum you can lose is the maximum you have self-bonded, but the delegators don't really get touched in that sense. But in the case of Cosmos, they do. In the Cosmos case, both delegation and self-bond are basically pulled together, and then the maximum you can lose in case you misbehave is the amount you have in there. So that's pretty interesting. And another particularity about Cosmos is that they also punish for liveness. And this is because they use the consensus determined by something called Tenement consensus, which is a BFD consensus. And in essence, what it means is 2/3 of the network have to agree. And if they don't agree, the network just halts. And that's why, this really explains why liveness is pretty heavily punished, actually, in this case. Which makes Cosmos pretty interesting and different than the others. And the last one is nominated proof of stake from Polkadot. I can't really tell many differences because I haven't found the specifications written out yet. This is based on the white paper they published some time ago. I'm pretty sure it changed. What I can tell from now is that, is that they have, in comparison to Cosmos proof of stake, they have 2 additional agents. So besides validators and delegators, they have something called collators and fishermen. I don't fully understand how they work yet because that's not been specified, but that should contribute somehow to security of the entire network. Okay. So now let's talk about privacy. And because zero knowledge summit, privacy. So, so generally, in platforms that are pseudonymous, like every other blockchain, like every blockchain really, Ethereum, Bitcoin. Bitcoin, because it's a peer-to-peer payment system, like generally it has been built as a payment system, as its purpose. If you do some analysis on the transactions, you can classify, let's say, the interactions, and by that you can classify the entities or actors that participate in the network. So you can come to things like exchanges, you can identify things like marketplaces, and so on, gambling platforms, and so on. And the same goes for Ethereum. And Ethereum, with the case of, besides that, there's also smart contracts. You can analyze what's the purpose, and by that you can classify, let's say, this is a platform that sells non-fungible tokens, and so on. But when it comes to proof of stake, really the two questions I have on mind normally are, so the particularity of proof of stake system so far is that the platform is not really meant for payments, so you can do peer-to-peer payments, but token holders are normally incentivized to either stake themselves, so become a validator, or to delegate, because otherwise they get inflated away very easily. So it's not that much for payments. Most of them will have, I think Tezos, for example, has a smart contract platform, and you can write smart contracts, but it's not quite there yet. And so really, it comes to two questions to me when it comes to privacy. How do you discover validators? Because in most of the cases, there's this limitation where delegators have to trust the validator somehow. They cannot have to know which one to delegate to, because there's some opportunity cost in the case of Tezos, and in the case of Cosmos, you can basically lose all your tokens, right? If you delegate to a validator that later on misbehaves. So you have to know them, which makes these services normally public. So in our case, for example, we announce ourselves, we have a website, we have like a public address that everybody knows. We appear in all block explorers. On zkSNARK, which is the main block explorer for Tezos, all the bakers are listed, so you can see which name and which entity they belong to. So really, it's very public. And how do you participants interact with you? Meaning on-chain, for example, is there a notion, I don't know if you guys know about Bitcoin, there was this huge thing about privacy. And people were by that time, many years ago, mixing services, for example, were pretty popular. It was Bitcoin Fog, there was like a lot of different mixing services. There's not really this notion right now in this case. So, which means that if you look into block explorers and you look into transactions, there's normally a direct transaction from delegated to baker. And then if you visualize this network, it becomes very clear that large blocks will be bakers most likely, and the small ones are delegators. Sure, you might say that they're still hidden behind a pseudonymous address, but how hard is it really to correlate the nicknames you use, maybe in social media? Let's say, normally these people would sign up for group chats and Telegram for the bakers, like to ask them questions and so on. How hard is it to correlate this public data, semi-public data, with these public addresses? I think it's generally not that hard, especially because there's not that many groups you have to get into, right? And all of them are not restricted. And then, so next thing is, so how do we increase privacy in proof-of-stake networks? And many of you might think, if any of these networks successfully implement zero-knowledge proofs, then everything's magically solved. But that's actually not true, because, and this is less intuitive, it's most networks, they are the infrastructure which all of these networks rely on. Are you sure that all the communications between these layers are also zero knowledge? Are you leaking any information when you, for example, the app you use, which is normally live client, that speaks a full node, is that communication also zero knowledge? And then, and other things like when you sign up for a service, you're already for exchanges you have to KYC. Or in the case of validators, so in a scenario where zero knowledge proof is actually implemented at the protocol level, how do I discover my validators then? How do I, and how do validators promote themselves? Like say, this is my address, don't send another one. Or things like that. So there's a lot of thinking, I would say, to do. It's not only about let's just get some large proofs into this platform and then everything's fine. Yeah, so for discussions and whatever questions you might have on this, I would like to let you know that there's this breakout session. It will be led by Adrian, just sitting over there. It's at 12 at the breakout room 2. But I think this time, I don't really know how we're running on. Yeah, maybe or I just like finish this, unless you prefer to ask me questions right now. Or I just finish this and then just go around, you can catch me. Well, anyways, well, yeah, just to let you know that there was the breakout session, and there's a couple of resources that I read. There's actually more than this, but there's a couple of good. If you're really interested in proof of stake as a research topic, I would recommend you to read of this. The main challenge that you will find is that a lot of these things are just in format of blog posts that are not necessarily technical specifications. In a lot of cases, you might have to go into the source code and then read into how it's implemented. And by that, you have to infer basically how it works. And yeah, thank you.